Yakovich versus McShane. How to use your knights properly. Let's see how to do it. This position looks very even. And if you call yourself an in-game aficionado or a Magnus Carlsen Jr. or Casablanca on, from 2020, how would you evaluate this position? You might say that black actually might have the advantage because you know what's important in an in-game, right? King activity. Who has the more active king? Black. Who has the worst placed king? White. It might be a little awkward now. The rooks are not out just yet, but the rook will come to c8, the rook will come to d8. This knight is a little weirdly placed, but he could quickly hop into b4, d5. This is the way to go. Black says, I'm just going to quickly make these moves. You can't really stop me, and I'm going to have an advantage. Truth of the matter, though, is our knights are not going to let that happen. Our knights are too strong. That is not the knight. So, excuse me. The first move here was, man, excuse me. The first move here was our anti-knight strategy move. I believe that if black is given a free move, black will play the knight freeing knight to b4. And this is because when you start to look at this position deeply, you see that black has not a group of moves that he can play. It's more like a string or a series of moves he has to play in order to achieve the position I just mentioned. So let's say this. If white plays a terrible trash move, like that would be really, really bad for white, because that, I'm not sure, like, he'd probably have to resign if that knight did that. Okay, let me make legal moves here. Pawn to h3, a bad move for white. Pawn to h3. Now the tables begin to turn. Knight to a4, knight to b4 will come, threatening the pawn on a2. Let's say you don't have to attack this knight. You can just go pawn to a4, which is a strong move to solidify this knight on b5. That's an advanced knight. It's so good, isn't it? Uh-oh. The pawn comes to a6 now. Now your knight actually has to leave. You can go to c7, but ooh, I think you might find yourself trapped on c7. Knight c7, rook a c8, and this knight can't go anywhere. This square is covered. But anyway, once you do this, king f1, rook to d8, and you just say to yourself, this position looks good for black, and it really is. But let's change one thing about this position. Let me remind you that this was a string by showing you what happens if this knight doesn't move. Okay, so this rook can come out whenever he wants to. That's true. But let's say this knight doesn't move to b4. Can this rook go to c8? No, because then he would lose the a7 pawn. Okay, that's fine. Let's move the pawn to a6. Oh wait, I don't want to eat my own knight. So you can't do that. You have to move the knight first. So let's move the knight to b4. Oh, wait a second. This is the only square for the knight to go to that's advanced. Let's play the move pawn to a3. Pawn to a3. This is a grandmaster move. It's a master move. It's a move that you can play as well if you know anti-knight strategy. It's so simple, but so effective. A position that looks relatively even on the surface actually is massively advantageous for the white pieces. This position is close to losing for black because black can't move a single piece without giving up material. So let me explain. Remember that string I told you? So, I mean, he can go rook to d8. I don't think he went rook to d8, though, in this position. Let me see. He went, after pawn to a3, he did go rook fd8. And then white played the move pawn to a4. Now it's time to start that series of moves. Can the knight go to a3 so that the pawn can get out, so that the rook can get out, so that black can have a better position? No. Can the knight go to c5 so that the pawn can get out, so that the rook can get out, so that he can have a better position? No. Could he do it before the pawn went to b4? No, either, because the rook is on c1. So, no. Can he go to c7 so that the pawn can go down, so the rook can come out? No. Can he go to b8? Well, he can, but do you see the tactical reason why knight b8 loses? What would be the reason why knight b8 loses? I just make the move here. Knight b8 looks really good. It looks like you're just resetting. You're going to go knight to d7, knight to e5, bring that knight to an advanced support point. It blocks the rooks, but there's something even more dangerous than blocking the rooks here. In fact, it blocks the rooks from moving at all. And a piece that can't move at all, we call it a trap. But we also see this rook is very snugly defended. There's no way that our rook or our pawn could attack that rook. But what is the only piece that can hop over other pieces? That would be the knight on b5. It can go to c7. Ooh, the rook is trapped. Look away. It's ugly. It's ugly for black. So you can't go knight to b8. Look at this one. Black can't go knight to b8 because of our anti-knight strategy. Because of our beautifully placed knight on b5. He can't move his rook out. That's fine. Let's what can we do? If you're black, that's probably what you're thinking. I can't move my knight. I can't move my pawn. I can't move my rook. I can't move anything. And you're absolutely right. This position is just, it's frozen. You know, this is, I don't know if it's Frozen 1 or Frozen 2, which Elsa it is, but it's, you can't do nothing. You can't do nothing here, as we say in the South. This position is bad for black. Let me show you how the rest of this game went and how the strong Yakovich won this game. Rook f to d8, pawn to b4. Black played a very useful move. He brought the pawn to e5, but also kicks out this knight. So knight to b3 was played. And knight to c4. Now remember, this knight looks good on c4. And by the way, of course, don't go capturing this guy. Don't go capturing this guy by going like, haha. And then, haha again, because you get checkmated on the back rank. So this knight looks really good on c4, but remember, it was this knight that needed to move. It was blocking this pawn, which was trapping or preventing this rook from moving. So this little thing is the problem. Knight c4 is not such a big deal. We're okay with allowing this little fancy move, knight to c4. We're okay with that. Notice as well, rook takes d1. Rook takes d1, knight c7 doesn't work because we still have a knight on b5. So knight to c4, a fancy move, but a move we shouldn't be afraid of. It doesn't change the dynamics. He can move this knight, and that's it. And maybe this rook, if he wants to. But the rook is already on such a good square. Why would he want to move? So king to f1. The one advantage black had going into this endgame was his king position. Now we're going to realize that white's king can move into position quicker than black's. King to f1. Then we see, or do we see it all? I don't know if we see. King f1. Okay, rook takes d1. Rook takes d1. King to e7. King to e2. He's running out of useful moves. By the way, this game is not in How to Reassess Your Chess. I'm just using the principles from this game, or from that book in this game. This game is from Chess Master. We'll probably go through this book sometime soon, what it takes to become a chess master. One of my favorite books as well. King to e2, which of course just is improving the king's position. And you might start to see that black is running out of useful moves. His king can't come over this way anymore, towards the queen side. His knight really, he can't take on a3 because of our knight. He can't, the knight's on as good of the squares as he can get. Black is really running out of useful squares. What does black do now? What is there? So he has a couple of ideas. He tried to move king e6, so he might try to advance these kingside pawns. Now, white played a tactic. And the thing I tell you that all great players know is that a positional game generally can be finished off with a tactic. The question is, how long will it take before your opponent gives you a tactic. How hard of a tactic will it be to spot? Will you take advantage of it? Generally, the game will end with a tactic. The good players, they build up the pressure. The position, the position looks normal here, but because of what I told you, you know that black's under tremendous pressure. If black is under such pressure and it doesn't look like it on the board, does it mean anything? Yes, it does. It means something. Here, this move, king e6, for all intents and purposes, you might call it a blunder. Doesn't look like a blunder. Why? Because of knight c5 check, winning the b7 pawn. You see, it's a fork. It's a fork of the pawn, it's a fork of the king, and you fork in the knight. Wait, you can't fork a knight. So he just takes. What's the point? I don't get this. Knight c5. I don't get it. I don't get it. Oh, there's that knight as well. I forgot about that knight on b5. It wasn't just useful in the threat on the a7 pawn. Huh. Yep, that knight is the one that ends up forking and basically toasting black. Or what is it? Shish kebabbing? Is that what you do when you like kind of skewer something? So shish kebab of the black pieces. Yep, next level right here, and so we gave up a knight, so we're down a piece. But then once the king moves, which black resigned in this position, but once the king moves, knight takes a8, and yeah, we're just up a piece. Our knight won't get trapped in the corner. For instance, knight a6, which looks like it traps the knight, is not really a big deal. In fact, I think probably our best move is just, I don't know, there's a lot of good moves. I can move this a pawn to get it out of the way of the knight, but probably just pawn to b5, threaten the knight again. And then I can go rook c1. That's a skewer, or shish kebab, whatever you want to call it. And, or a pin. Is it a pin when it's two pieces of the same value, or a skewer? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to be up material, and we're going to be winning this game very comfortably.